Will you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable to you, O Holy One, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. It is quite amazing to be back here worshiping among you and ministering with you at Trinity Cathedral. For those of you who don't yet know me, I actually spent my first 5 years of ordained ministry serving here. So it is quite a spot in my heart. And I'm grateful to come back. And in the meantime, I've been away in quite a few places doing quite a few things. I was in Seattle forming a holistic wellness and spirituality ministry for Episcopal clergy women, and I was also supplying at area churches on Sunday morning for different priests who were out. And most immediately, I was serving as the chaplain and camp director at the Bishop's Ranch, which is a retreat center in Healdsburg, California. And I arrived there in August of 2019, and I was quite eager to see how things went there. I had heard that there was quite an amazing rhythm of life and quite beautiful Sunday morning worship that I was now going to shepherd people in. Not even 2 months into being there, we were hit with our first, but not last, wildfire evacuation. And it was at this scary extended time where everyone had to leave the property. Everyone in all of Healdsburg and surrounding towns where the parishioners were from had to leave, and they weren't quite certain with what would emerge. Luckily, we all got to come back, and I got to experience a few months of this beautiful rhythm of life and begin to get to know people and how things were done. And then, 4 months later, we were all hit with the news of the global pandemic, which I'm sure you can remember where you were and what you were doing when you received that news. And I remember sitting in our staff meeting thinking, oh my goodness, we can't have church on Sunday morning. What are we going to do? So I immediately printed out all the contact list of all the parishioners, and I set out to call them all to check in, see how people were. But I also knew that I needed to make a plan for Sunday morning. Thinking about what I knew about my congregation already, I knew that they loved coming to worship. For even like up to an hour drive away. They loved it. And we had explored doing some hybrid classes before the pandemic started. And by and large, I heard, that's not my thing, or I'm not quite comfortable with that. So knowing that, I was like, okay, I'll invite people to a conference call. Surely this can't last that many Sundays, and people can call in, we can hear people's voices, and we can pray together. That will be enough. And the first couple of calls in seemed to be going well, and then someone said, I wonder if we could do video conferencing. Our service is so participatory with shared reflections and readings. I wonder if that might work. I don't quite know how to do it, but maybe you do. And I did. So that's what we endeavored to do our first Sunday, and then I met with people and taught them how to use this technology too. And little by little, we created this holy, sacred space. A year and a half later, we started gathering for in-person services, but we also had this gigantic screen, kind of like how we have on Sundays, where the people could call in from Zoom and they could read the reading, and everyone could see and hear them, and vice versa. And it was this beautiful experience that included way more people than we could possibly imagine, and it was beautifully holy, because I got out of my limited thinking and control of the situation. And that's exactly what we hear Jesus doing this morning. We hear him inviting us out of limiting thinking and control. And it's a little bit disorienting because we've been in Mark for a while, and all of a sudden we're smack in the middle of John 6, the beginning, and we get these 2 huge miracle stories, these signs. And when we know a sign about Jesus, when John tells us these signs, he wants us to know something about the person of Jesus and what he's come to earth to do. So in the first story, we find Jesus going up the mountain with all the disciples. And usually all the crowds would be away at the temple preparing for Passover, but we find some of the crowds following Jesus up the mountain because they've experienced this piece of the holy that he is inviting people into. And so in this story, Jesus is compelled to compassion, and he feels for the people who have gathered around them. And he says, they're hungry. Where can we find food to eat? And when Philip is posed with this question, he immediately says, not even 6 months' wages would cover costs for this food. It seems impossible. And of course he would respond that way because he's rooted in a system of scarcity in the Roman occupation where they use food, power, and control to keep people controlled. And then Andrew comes in and says, I see this boy with 5 loaves and 2 fishes, but that can't even make a dent in the immense hunger we have here. It's no matter for Jesus, though. Jesus is moved to compassion. He takes those 5 loaves and those 2 fishes, and he blesses them and breaks them and distributes them. And the miracle is that all are fed, all are nourished, all feel like they belong, and there's some left over. This abundance continues and continues and continues. And this is an important thing to know about Jesus. He invites us into love and abundance. And then immediately after this moment, the disciples are going back to business as usual. They're back in the boat and on the water. And Jesus comes to them, but in no ordinary way, as we hear, literally walking on water. And I can only imagine the shock and awe going through all of their minds. This seems impossible. According to the rules of nature we know, a person should not be able to walk on water. And compassionately, Jesus knows they're naturally afraid. And he says, "It is I. Don't be afraid." Speaking to that fear. And in our translation, Jesus says, "It is I. Do not be afraid." But in other biblical translations, you'll find a more straightforward Jesus saying, "I am. I am. Don't be afraid." And that might recall a memory back to Old Testament, where Moses meets God in the burning bush. And all of the Israelites want to put Moses in a box about what sort of leader he should be and what he should be doing. And God comes to him in the bush and gives him all these directives. And I imagine what feelings must be going through Moses' head. But he's met with the same thing when Moses asks, "Who should I say sent me?" And we get the same, "I am. I am God." So in this moment where the disciples meet Jesus walking on the water, he says, "I am. Don't be afraid." And they have this moment, and I imagine there's this split second of absolute clarity about who Jesus is and what he came to do. And then immediately there's this partial seeing of Jesus where they are like, "Get back in the boat, get in the boat." And Jesus tries to be put back in the boat by the disciples. And I wonder how much we try to put God in the boat, or we try to put God in the box. We try to put the sacred and things we can't control. I imagine that extends out to so many arenas in our lives because we're human. The world is so scary and at times uncontrollable. So it helps us organize the way we live by putting things in systems and boxes. But sometimes those systems of comfort and understanding actually turn out to be systems of control. And Jesus invites us into this discernment of which is which in these miracles. And if there's any time that has invited us to really discern the systems we live in, both in our personal lives and in the systems we inhabit, it's been this time of global pandemic, where we haven't been able to see each other, we haven't been able to gather. And now we're entering this time where we're able to partially, but things are different. And it might challenge our sense of comfort and security and feeling close to God. But in those times, I hope we can come close to the feeling that that's actually the heart of God and God's hope for us, that we embrace what we don't know, that we embrace the mystery, and we say, "God, I have no idea what's going on right now, that I seek to follow you. How can I do it? So I invite you in these next few days and weeks and months to enter into this discernment. What are those things in your life that feel comfortable and safe, but are actually not quite serving you? What is God inviting you into that's bigger, that's life abundant? Notice that, inhabit that, share that.